What's up, guys? Today I'm going to present you with a video that I had a tough time finding. I'm going to be rebuilding the supercharger. It's an EATON M90 supercharger, and it's on a 97 Toyota Land Cruiser. It goes to the 4.5Z series engine. I'm going to walk you through as much of this as humanly possible. This is specifically for the Land Cruiser, but it'll also work on many other types of similar superchargers. So stand by. You take your wits end specialty tool, or you figure out a different way. You get that on your belt tensioner, and then you remove the belt. Easy peasy. For those that don't have one, you can get this at absolutewitsend.com. It's a nice tool. Next, we take a number 30 Torx bit, put it in a socket or whatever you have. And then you take this syringe right here, 60 milliliter with the hose on it. Feed it into the drain hole and remove all the fluid. Now, I already did this previously, but I'm just showing you. That's it. You should get two 60 milliliter syringes full out of your TRD Land Cruiser Supercharger. That amount may vary, but you will get two of these, 120 milliliters roughly. Now, this supercharger has 100,000 miles on it, which is why I'm rebuilding it right now. You take a 10 millimeter socket and remove all the 10 millimeter bolts holding the snout to the body of the supercharger. It doesn't take much to get them out. It should be easy enough. And then finally, after all the nuts are removed, all 8 of them, all 8 10 millimeter bolts that hold the snout to the supercharger body, you're going to go around and separate the snout from the actual body of the supercharger. Now, to get the housing away from the body, I took a very broad wood chisel and then put Gorilla Tape on it to protect the casting. And by slowly going around the perimeter with a soft mallet, it's slowly making its way off. I'm ever so slightly tapping around the housing and it's coming apart. Okay, so with some very gentle tapping and then slowly rocking the unit back and forth, I have it apart. And I literally only spilled maybe a drop or so of the oil. So that's perfect. That's exactly what I was looking for. Now what I'm going to do is replace that bad Larry right there, the 2 bearings inside, and the seal on the end. Meanwhile, I clean this out with a clean piece of linen. I don't want to contaminate it inside, and then put plastic and elastics over it for overnight. Just so you know, the supercharger oil stinks. It smells like cat piss, or I mean, it doesn't smell like tranny, motor oil, gear oil. It stinks. No clue why, just FYI. So I cleaned up the inside. This is the other side of the drain fill. And instead of using brake clean, I used some of this. Now, I've been in contact with Ed LaBarge. Ed LaBarge has a YouTube channel, as well as being quality superchargers online. I'll leave links in the description, but This is what he sent me. TRD charges about $169 for one bottle of this, but it's a special TRD blend. The coupling and that. If you hit up Quality Superchargers on eBay, link will be in the description, he sends you the coupling, the front and rear bearing for the supercharger snout, as well as a new seal, the syringe required, the hose like you saw earlier, and 2 bottles of this. And his customer support has been absolutely phenomenal thus far. So on my particular setup, which I assume might be the same on all Land Cruisers, I'm taking an 18mm socket and a glove, and that removes the retaining nut on top of the pulley. You can see this right here, the pulley is keyed, so just keep that in mind. A lot of schmegma in there. There's the retaining clip, the seal, there's a bearing inside here. You can see it right there. The shaft, the spring, don't forget the spring, and the other bearing. And I'm going to show you how to get that off in a minute, or I'm going to try. Okay, there's a retaining clip in here that you want to pull out before you attempt to press the bearing and the seal. There's a seal and a bearing with a retaining clip. We got to remove the retaining clip first. And then we're going to put the face, the snout, on top of the press and push through on this side to knock the bearing and the seal out. And then we're going to replace the bearing and the seal. The retaining clip can be used over again. So you want to get this clip out of there, and that was really, really easy. Sorry about the camera, I'm losing it. There you go. Very, very easy. Now I'm putting everything that goes back in over to the side. I'm reusing the pulley because I didn't use a pulley. I didn't use a pulley tool. I pressed the shaft out, saving the spring. You're saving the nut, and of course you're going to save the shaft. Now what I want to do is put this face down on the press, and push from the other side. And push this bearing and seal right out of the housing without damaging anything. That's the name of the game. So I'm taking a socket that's slightly smaller than the housing on the inside. Taking an extension. Okay, seeing how I only have these metal plates, I'm going to keep double checking to make sure these plates are not in the way. That when I press this through, I'm not going to hit my own plate. So I'm going to put it right to the very outer edge. And then I'm going to press through. It shouldn't take very much. It shouldn't take very much. And it doesn't. And there we go. The seal's out. And the bearing's out. And the housing isn't damaged at all. Just make sure that when you put the socket in there, that you notice there's a lip, because there is a lip inside there. If you start pressing on that lip, you're going to destroy this casting, and you don't want to do that. Now that I have this all apart, I'm going to go clean it up. Clean this up as clean as you can get it. Throttle body cleaner, mass airflow cleaner. Some guys use brake clean. Whatever it takes to get it nice and clean. When I took this apart, the smell from the oil was something I wasn't expecting and something I'd never smelled before. So, and check the housing for any damage of any type. I don't see anything. It looks good, nice and clean. I want to press this bearing off. So what I'm going to do is support the bearing right here and then push straight down on it, push the shaft right out. So that's what I'm going to do next. Use a bearing splitter right here to support this. I don't happen to have one, so I'm going to do it like this and hope for the best. Center that thing up. That's not dead, not center, but alright, let me stand by. Okay. There it is. There it is. If you've ever used a press before, you know that it can be very scary right before that noise occurs. And all I have to press it out is that bolt. So now there we go. Okay, to reassemble it, I'm going to put this hub facing down on the press, and I want to support this. I don't want to sit it on these. I don't want it sitting on these pegs. So I'm going to slightly drill out the holes in the old coupling, slightly, just so there's a little play and so it doesn't get pressed on even worse. Actually, I'm not going to do that at all. We're good. So I'm going to put this back together like this, and then I'm going to put it on top of something with a little give, like maybe a thin piece of wood on top of these metal plates. Now when you set this up, make sure you remember that these are splined. This drive right here is splined, so make sure you want to set this in so that the teeth go in properly and you're not pressing them in. So you're going to do this. You can use the wood or not, that's just what I'm doing. And the bearing goes on top. You're going to push this entire assembly down. But before I do that, we're going to put a little supercharger oil in here and a little supercharger oil in there. Press these together. Everything will stop of its own accord. You should be in business. Okay, make sure that you take note of this. That with the brand new bearings, one bearing inside diameter is slightly smaller. So you have two sizes of bearings. One is slightly smaller, and just make sure that you put them back in correctly. Watch this in reverse if you have to. Okay, we've got the end pressed back on, we've got the new bearing on, we've got the spring on. Now you want to take the entire housing cover, and place it right over, make sure it's in the recess. And then next, the new bearing's going to go in on this side. Take a little bit of supercharger oil. Put that inside the bearing just to help it slide a little better. You know what, let's put a little bit on the outside. Put a little bit on the outside too, right? Why not? Because if you get this from Quality Superchargers, he sends you more than enough oil. Okay. And that's how you want it to look right now. And now we want to get a socket that fits right over the end. Use a 32 millimeter socket. A 32 millimeter socket fits over just right. So this whole assembly is still sitting on the old coupling as not to damage the 3 prongs. Make sure this is centered nicely. I put some supercharger oil inside the housing as well as on the bearing. Now we're going to push this right in. And that's it. I'm always cautious when I use a press. I was at my buddy Otram's Toyota shop down in Virginia, and he had just shot one straight across the shop. So I learned from that day that these things can be rather dangerous. Everything's spinning nicely. Now it's time to put in the seal. The seal, the clip, and then the pulley. And finally we'll put this bad guy back on. But again, I'm using the old one to protect the 3 prongs on the end. Okay, so take some supercharger oil. You want to put it on the shaft, and it's also giving the front bearing its initial oiling, we'll call it, right? Now that fits in there just right. So we're going to take this same impact socket. I'm using a 32 millimeter. I think a 33 millimeter would be ideal. But we're going to push on this ever so slightly. Make sure it's centered. We're going to push on this ever so slightly, and when it stops moving, it stops moving. Do not force it. It's not a bearing, it's a seal. Like I said, supercharger oil on the shaft, on the front bearing. That's its initial lubrication in the first place upon startup. Now this is the seal. So you already put lube on it. Make sure it's centered. Truck's my baby, so sometimes I'm a little paranoid. That's sliding down nice. Nice. When it stops, it's on. There you go. Pull it up. The next thing you're going to want to do is reinstall the retaining clip. I've already cleaned it up. So there we go. Push that in. Retaining clip is back in. That was pretty straightforward. There's that. So the snout is rebuilt. I just rebuilt my first supercharger snout, and you guys watched it live. How fucking awesome is that? Clean that up. Now when you put this pulley back on, obviously you can't forget, but I mean it's keyed, as is the pulley. I already cleaned up the pulley, I already cleaned up the shaft. You don't want a dirty shaft. Nobody likes a dirty shaft. You know what I'm saying? That went right, right back on. All right, we're gonna stand by because apparently I can't even talk. I just pushed that right back on. We're gonna use the same socket to put it back on. And we're not gonna confuse these two, are we? Because I already did. To tell you what, for 95,000 miles, there isn't even any damage to this. But this isn't a hot rod, it's a Land Cruiser. So I guess you shouldn't expect to be any damage. So we replaced the front, the rear bearings on our supercharger. We replaced the seal. And we're pretty happy thus far. So let's put this back on, right? Okay, I took the nut off and I'm gonna press this shaft on a little bit with the press. And then use the nut. And release pressure. We don't want to damage anything on this. And once again, before I did that, I put the coupling back on again. So bear with me because I'm learning just like you are. So there we go. That's it. Hit it with the impact wrench. Put it back on. Didn't go crazy with it, but everything's spinning really smoothly. Everything's looking good. You want to line these up. And you'll see the sealant coming out of the sides. "20 foot-pounds. So that's where we're at. I'm going to let this set up for a while and then I'm going to refill it. The bearings were fine. Meanwhile, I'm going to put my airbox back. But that's it. And judging by how clean everything was inside, the bearings were fine. 95,000 miles. Now this isn't a hot rod or a race car. This just helps get the truck up to a nice even 300 horsepower from the horrible 225 it comes from with the factory. Could you completely disassemble the blower to put it back in? Absolutely. Am I going to have a little bit of trouble getting fluid back in? Probably,